Hi everyone, Steve here. Today I will speak about the signs of midlife crisis and I will give you some ideas on how to get out of it. There comes a point in life that catches a lot of people completely off guard because on paper everything should feel fine. You've worked for years, you've carried responsibility, you've built a career, a family, a routine, maybe even a reputation. From the outside, your life may actually look successful to other people. But internally, something starts shifting. You wake up one morning and notice that the things that used to motivate you don't hit the same way anymore. The job that once gave you purpose now just feels exhausting. The routines that once made you feel grounded suddenly feel repetitive and emotionally empty. Even the goals you spend years chasing start to feel strangely disconnected from who you are becoming. And what makes this phase difficult is that most people don't immediately recognize what's happening. They think they're just tired or maybe burned out or ungrateful or simply losing motivation. But sometimes the truth is much deeper than that. Sometimes you are not falling apart at all. Sometimes you are waking up to the realization that the version of life you build no longer matches the version of yourself you're becoming. That is where many midlife crises actually begin. Not with the same dramatic Hollywood breakdown, not with buying a sports car or quitting your job overnight, but with a quiet internal disconnect that slowly grows louder over time. And the strange thing is, most people experience this without talking about it openly because they feel embarrassed admitting that after all those years, they still feel lost. So, in this video, I want to walk through some of the biggest signs that you may be going through a midlife crisis, or what I personally like to call it is a midlife transition. And more importantly, I want to talk about what you can actually do next. So this period becomes one of the most important turning points of your life instead one of the darkest. Because despite how uncomfortable this phase can feel, it can also become the beginning of a far more meaningful chapter if you handle it correctly. The very first sign is the feeling of being trapped. This one is incredibly common, especially for people who have spent decades doing what they believed they were supposed to do. You followed the path, you worked hard, you became responsible, you built stability, but somewhere along the way, your life slowly became a structure that no longer feels emotionally connected to you. You start feeling trapped inside routines that once felt very productive, trapped inside expectations you created years ago, trapped inside obligations that leave almost no room for curiosity, creativity, excitement, or personal growth. And what makes this dangerous is that many people try to solve this feeling externally instead of looking internally. They assume the answer is destroying everything they built, when often the real issue is that they've neglected themselves for too long. The second sign is not knowing what you actually want anymore. This can feel incredibly unsettling because most adults we pride ourselves on being decisive. Yet suddenly you start realizing you spend so much time reacting to life that you no longer know what genuinely excites you. You know what pays the bills, yes. You know what keeps other people comfortable, correct. You know what's practical, that's right. But ask yourself what truly energizes you now, and the answer suddenly becomes very blurry. And that uncertainty can create a huge amount of anxiety because it forces you to confront something uncomfortable. Maybe you've evolved, but your life hasn't evolved with you. Another major sign is when your life stops making emotional sense. This is hard to explain unless you've experienced it personally. You look around and objectively understand your life, yet emotionally you feel disconnected from it. Almost like you're playing a role you've been performing for years instead of fully living. People often describe this as feeling numb, detached, or strangely empty, despite having responsibilities, achievements, or even financial stability. And one of the clearest indicators that this is happening is when the things that used to satisfy you no longer satisfy you. The promotion doesn't feel the same. The possessions don't excite you anymore. The routines feel mechanical. Even distractions stop working properly. This is usually the point where people begin searching for relief instead of meaning. And that's where things can become very dangerous. Because another major sign of a midlife crisis is increased compulsive behavior. Some people start overeating, some start drinking, some obsess over shopping, gambling, attention, social media, or any kind of validation. Others suddenly become addicted to productivity because staying busy, that's what they think, helps them avoid confronting what they actually feel. Most compulsive behavior during midlife isn't really about pleasure, it's usually about emotional escape. People are trying to silence anxiety they don't fully understand. Another very common sign is experiencing unusual mood swings, frustration, or mild depression. You notice yourself becoming impatient more easily. Small problems suddenly irritate you far more than they should. You feel emotionally exhausted even when nothing dramatic is happening. And perhaps the most confusing part is that you can't always identify a clear reason for it. That emotional tension often spills into sleep patterns as well. Some people can't get out of bed in the morning because they no longer feel emotionally connected to the day ahead. Others stay awake at night because their mind never fully shuts off. And when this continues long enough, it creates a dangerous cycle because poor sleep intensifies emotional instability, and emotional instability worsens sleep. Then comes one of the biggest moments in this entire experience. You begin questioning your major life decisions, your career, your relationships, your marriage, your priorities, the sacrifices you made, the identity you built. And this can create guilt because people often think, I should be grateful. Why am I questioning everything now? But questioning your life does not automatically mean your life was a mistake. That distinction matters enormously. Sometimes it simply means your internal values are evolving faster than your external environment. You also begin reevaluating your priorities in ways you never did before. When you're younger, life often revolves around achievement, proving yourself, survival, building stability, and gaining recognition. But eventually, many people reach a stage where meaning becomes more important than status. And once that shift begins, you can't really unsee it. You start asking deeper questions. What actually matters to me now? What kind of life do I want outside of work? Who am I when I'm not performing for everyone else? And strangely enough, during this period, even small decisions can suddenly become difficult because internally you no longer trust the direction you're moving in. That uncertainty creates friction everywhere. You feel frustrated with people, frustrated with your environment and your surroundings, frustrated with yourself. And eventually, many people experience a sudden urge to improve themselves physically. They want to lose weight, get healthier, look better, feel stronger again. Now, sometimes people mock this stage as vanity, but honestly, I think it's often much deeper than that. I think many people are trying to reconnect with themselves physically because internally they no longer feel fully alive. They're trying to reclaim energy, confidence, vitality, and even identity. Now, here's the important part. Most people think a midlife crisis is something to avoid. If you ask me, I don't fully agree. I think for many people, this phase is actually an invitation, an invitation to stop living entirely on autopilot, an invitation to finally confront the gap between the life you build and the life you genuinely want. The problem is not the awakening itself. The problem is how people respond to it. Some people panic and destroy their lives impulsively. Others suppress everything and slowly become emotionally numb for the next 20 years. Neither approach works. What actually helps is learning how to rebuild intentionally instead of emotionally exploiting. So, what should you do if you recognize yourself in these signs? First, stop assuming something is wrong with you simply because your priorities are changing. Human beings evolve. Your emotional needs at 25 are not the same as your emotional needs at 45 or 50. The problem is that many people update their phones more often than they update their identity. Second, stop chasing distractions and start chasing clarity. This phase is not solved through random dopamine hits. It's solved by becoming brutally honest about what is missing. Is it meaning? Is it freedom, creativity, connection, purpose, health, maybe challenge, or even, peace of mind? Until you identify the actual void, you'll keep trying to fill it with temporary relief. Third, rebuild parts of your life gradually instead of blowing everything up emotionally. This is where maturity matters. You do not need to quit your job tomorrow. You do not need to disappear into another country. You do not need to abandon your responsibilities, but you probably do need to start creating a version of your life that includes you again. That may mean learning new skills, starting a side project, improving your health, traveling more, building deeper relationships, creating something meaningful. Start setting boundaries, or finally admitting that the life you want moving forward cannot look identical to the life you built 20 years ago. And lastly, understand this clearly. Fulfillment is rarely found by returning to who you used to be. It's usually found by becoming who you were avoiding becoming. That's the real shift. A lot of people are not actually afraid of failure during midlife. They're afraid of reinvention. They're afraid of admitting they want more from life emotionally, but also mentally, spiritually, and even on a personal level. But there's nothing weak about realizing you've outgrown an old version of yourself. In many ways, that awareness is the beginning of real growth. So if life feels strange lately, if you feel disconnected, restless, emotionally exhausted, uncertain about what's going to come next, maybe this is not the end of your best years. Maybe this is the first moment you're finally starting to ask the right questions. And maybe the goal is not to go backwards. Maybe the goal is to build a life that finally feels like yours again. Take it from someone who has been there, went through the process, and is trying to help others do the same. There is more to come in the next videos, so do stay tuned. If you want to hear more, do me a favor, hit the like and subscribe buttons, and let's work together to get over bottlenecks that slow us down. Till next time, take care of yourself.